Your alarm still goes off at 6:40 a.m., even though there is no longer any reason for it to. You reach over in the dark and silence it before the second buzz, the same motion you've made for 19 years. And for a moment you lie there in the gray light doing the thing you promised yourself you'd stop doing, which is calculating. Not money anymore, time. You have, by the most conservative math you've ever allowed yourself, somewhere between 40 and 50 years left. And as of 11 weeks ago, not a single one of them is spoken for. You retired at 41. Nobody knows. Your wife knows, technically, though even she uses the word sabbatical when it comes up, because retired is a word that does something to a room, and neither of you has figured out how to say it without watching the other person's face change. Your mother thinks you're between projects. Your closest friend, Emeka, thinks you're consulting from home now, which is the phrase you gave him at a barbecue in June because it was easier than the truth, and it happened to end the conversation cleanly, the way the good lies always do. Here's what most people get wrong about retiring early. They think the hard part is the money. The money is the easy part, or at least it's the solved part, the part with spreadsheets and a number and a withdrawal rate you stress-tested against 3 recessions before you ever handed in the badge. The hard part is that you have removed yourself from the single largest source of identity available to an adult in this country, and you have done it silently, and now you get to watch what remains. You didn't announce it. That was the first decision, made months before the last one. There was no email to the team, no cake in the break room, no LinkedIn post with a slightly too humble caption about a chapter closing, and gratitude and exciting things ahead. You simply structured an exit that looked, from the outside, like a lateral move into something vague. You told the company you were leaving to pursue independent work. You told the neighbors nothing at all, because the neighbors never asked. And you told yourself that the silence was about privacy, which was true, but underneath the true reason was a second one you wouldn't look at directly for weeks. You weren't sure you'd believe it yourself if you said it out loud, and you weren't sure the number would hold if too many people knew it existed. The account that made this possible reads, $2.3 million. You have never said that figure to another human being who wasn't legally required to hear it. Your financial advisor, a careful woman named Halverson, knows it. The IRS knows a version of it. Your wife knows the shape of it without ever having watched it accumulate month by month the way you did, quietly, for 16 years, in the negative space of a life that from the outside looked completely ordinary. You drove a Camry until the Camry embarrassed your kids. You brought lunch. You maxed accounts nobody could see and let everyone assume you were, like them, roughly breaking even, roughly stressed, roughly on the same ladder climbing at roughly the same speed. You weren't. You'd stopped climbing years ago. You'd been coasting to the exit for longer than anyone suspected, and the coasting was invisible because coasting, done correctly, looks exactly like working. The first week, you understood immediately why people don't do this. It wasn't the boredom. Everyone warns you about the boredom, and the boredom is real, but it's manageable. It's a Tuesday problem. What nobody warns you about is the specific vertigo of an unstructured morning when your entire nervous system was built, over 19 years, to respond to a calendar that no longer sends alerts. You made coffee. You sat down. And your body produced, on schedule, the low hum of anxiety it used to produce before a Monday, except there was nothing on the other end of it. No meeting, no deliverable, no one waiting. The anxiety arrived anyway, right on time, a phantom limb of a job that no longer existed, and it took you until roughly the 4th week to stop flinching at 8:55 a.m. The second silence is social, and it's stranger than the first. You go to a dinner party in the 2nd month. Someone you've just met asks the question everyone asks, the one that in this country functions as a greeting, as a locating device, as the fastest possible way to sort a stranger into a category. So what do? And you feel, in the half-second before you answer, the entire machinery of the decision spin up. If you say, "I'm retired," at 41, in a room of people your age who are all still very much inside it, you will detonate a small bomb. The conversation will stop being a conversation and become an interrogation, gentle and smiling and relentless, because retired at 41 is not information. It's a claim, and claims demand evidence. How? Doing what? Did you sell something? Did you inherit? What's the number? Nobody will say what's the number, but everyone will be running the calculation behind their eyes for the rest of the night, and you will have stopped being a person and started being a math problem they're trying to solve. So you don't say it. You say, I'm taking some time between things, which is technically true and practically a lie, and the person nods and moves on, and you feel the specific loneliness of having told the truth in a shape designed to be immediately forgotten. This is the trade you didn't fully price when you built this. You bought freedom, complete freedom, more freedom than almost anyone you know. And the cost of keeping it clean is that you cannot tell the people around you that you have it. The moment you do, it stops being freedom and becomes a thing that has to be explained, defended, justified, and eventually resented by someone, somewhere, who did the same job for the same years and is still setting an alarm that means something. The third silence is the one at home, and it's the one you didn't see coming at all. Your wife, Renata, still works. This was the plan, or at least it was the thing you both agreed to without ever quite deciding it, because her job carries the health insurance and because she genuinely likes it in a way you stopped liking yours around year 12. And so a new asymmetry has entered the house, quiet and structural, the kind of thing that doesn't announce itself, but reorganizes everything underneath. She leaves at 7:40. You do not. She comes home at 6:15 to a house that is cleaner than it used to be, to dinner that is better than it used to be. And for the first few weeks, this felt like a gift. And then one evening in the 9th week, she set down her bag and looked at the table you'd set and said, not unkindly, not as an attack, just as a fact that had been accumulating, it must be nice. And she was right. And you had no defense because it was nice. It was extremely nice. And there is no version of, I know, that doesn't sound like an apology for something you're not actually sorry about. You've started lying about your days to her, too, in small ways. Not big lies, compression. When she asks what you did, you don't say, I read for 3 hours and took a 2-hour walk and watched a documentary, and it was one of the best days of my adult life. Because that sentence, said to a person who spent those same hours in back-to-back meetings, is a kind of violence you didn't intend. So you say not much, ran some errands, and you flatten the shape of your freedom so it doesn't take up more room at the table than her exhaustion does. This is the part nobody tells you. Even the person you love, even the person who wanted this for you, cannot fully witness it, because witnessing it fully would require her to hold your ease and her fatigue in the same hand at the same time, every single evening. And that is more than you have any right to ask. There's a moment around the 10th week that reorganizes something in you. You're at the grocery store on a Wednesday at 11 a.m., a time you'd never once shopped in your entire working life, and the store is full of people you've never seen before because they belong to a daytime world you didn't know existed. Retirees, decades older than you, parents with toddlers, a man about your age moving slowly through the produce section with the particular unhurried quality of someone who also, you realize with a jolt, has nowhere to be. You catch his eye for a second. Neither of you says anything, but you both know. There's a whole hidden economy of people who have quietly stepped off the ladder and are moving through the daytime world unremarked, financially invisible, deliberately ordinary, and you have just been inducted into it without a ceremony, recognized only by other members who will never say a word. You do the accounting you've been avoiding eventually, on an ordinary afternoon with nothing pressing. Not the financial accounting. That one's done. That one's been done for years. The other one. What you actually retired from, and whether you retired toward anything at all, or whether you just ran, quietly and successfully, from a version of your life that was slowly closing over your head. The honest answer is uncomfortable. You didn't have a dream waiting on the other side of the exit. You had a no. You had 19 years of a very specific no. A no to the meetings and the calendar and the low-grade Sunday dread, and you executed that no with more discipline and precision than you've ever applied to anything. And now you're standing in the space where the no used to be. And the space is enormous, and it is completely, terrifyingly unstructured. And it is asking you a question you spent 2 decades too busy to hear. Now, what do you actually want? That's the part they don't put in the early retirement content. The videos with the countdown clocks and the net worth reveals and the triumphant final day walkouts. They end at the exit. They end at the number. Because the number is the achievement. The number is the thing you can post, the thing the algorithm can measure, the thing a stranger can envy in 45 seconds before scrolling on. Nobody makes the video about week 11. Nobody makes the video about the phantom 8:55 anxiety, or the dinner party lie, or the "it must be nice," or the man in the produce aisle, or the slow dawning recognition that freedom is not a destination you arrive at, but a room you have to learn to furnish, alone, with nobody watching and nobody to tell. You still haven't told your mother. She still thinks you're between projects, and every few weeks she asks, gently, whether anything's come through yet, and you say you're being selective, which is another true sentence built in the shape of a lie. You haven't told Emeka the real version either, though last weekend you came close, sitting in his backyard while his kids ran through a sprinkler, and he asked how the consulting was going. And for one full second you almost said it. I'm not consulting. I retired. I'm 41 and I'm done, and I have been for 3 months, and I don't know how to feel about it, and there is no one on earth I can say that to. And then his youngest fell and started crying, and the moment closed, the way those moments always do, and you carried it home unspoken, the way you've carried the number for 16 years. Here's what you've learned that you didn't expect. The silence around the money was easy. You'd been practicing that one your whole life. The silence around the freedom is the one that costs. Because money, hidden, is just a number in an account, patient and quiet and content to stay unspoken. But freedom, hidden, is a life you're actually living in real time every single day in front of people who love you and cannot see it. And the not being seen doesn't diminish the freedom exactly, but it changes its texture. It makes it lonelier than the brochures promised. It makes every ordinary Wednesday a small secret you keep from a world that measures worth in busyness and would not know what to do with a man who, at 41, simply stopped. You retired at 41. You told no one. And the strange, unphotographable truth, the one that doesn't fit in a caption or a countdown or a net worth reveal, is that the retiring was the easy part. The telling no one. That's the part you're still doing every day, one flattened sentence at a time, protecting a freedom so complete that the only way to keep it clean is to make sure almost nobody ever knows it's there.